Busch Gardens Williamsburg, a tourist attraction in Williamsburg, Virginia, United States, was one of the first amusement parks I've ever gone to in my life. I remember going to this place since almost as early as I can remember how far back in life I can go, and there have been a dozen memories made by yours truly. From me knowing absolutely nothing about how soon the Big Bad Wolf would be slayed to the new version just getting started into its second season. Busch Gardens Williamsburg has quite a few things from the past for me to look back to. However, I got to visit this amusement park more than ever before last year, and one of the reasons I did so is that there were new coasters to check out. Now that I've done them all with a good feeling for how they ride, I'm ready to rank them all. But you're probably wondering where. Find out in this ranking. Before I start, I just wanted to clarify none of these roller coasters, except the one in last place, are bad attractions at all. I like all of these for a reason. However, when I imply that there was a bad coaster among the 11 at this park, I mean it. Because not even in the slightest amount of close to making the top 10 in last place. Look, I understand how harsh I'm treating this kids coaster straight off the start of this ranking, especially knowing that this had the fortune of being the first roller coaster I ever rode. But there's something about Grover's Alpine Express that makes it an utter mess in my eyes. Yes, I know that it's an attraction that's there for the kids, and I can also agree that they still need it in their coaster lineup today. Oh, wait, this kiddie coaster is also in Williamsburg, and it opened before this attraction. Hmm. Okay, I won't hold in the reason anymore, guys. I may really dislike Sesame Street, but that theme just makes me feel bothered while I'm riding it. I don't think Grover's the biggest reason to make me feel that way of all the Sesame Street characters out there, and to be honest, the last time I rode it, I thought it may have delivered a couple legit positive G's. But if you remember tuning into my channel back in the day, you may have heard how much I say that theming can make or break an attraction. If there was ever a theme that bothers you and was tied into an amusement attraction, you would also feel bothered and take points off of that attraction, would you? That's how I feel about Sesame Street as a whole. Now, do I want to like my first roller coaster? Sure, but the theme is the biggest among more flaws that keep me from doing so. And is that a shame? Also, sure. All right, on to the start of the top 10, featuring the attraction celebrating half a century of the park's existence. Big Bad Wolf surely came with revenge on its mind, but not quite in the aggressive way someone would think. That said, I like Big Bad Wolf, The Wolf's Revenge, in addition to the coasters that come after in this ranking. Though I think this is the weakest of the coasters that I like here, that's mainly because it rides the weakest, as well as a trash name. However, I'm struggling to think about anything else it does bad. The theming is pretty well done, the setting is really good, it tries to be unique among the rest of its model thanks to a second lift hill, and I honestly think the layout it has is better than how it rides. It's even got a soundtrack. While I think it sounds okay, it's appreciated to make it even more of an immersive attraction. And I sure love the immersion as long as I'm not bothered by the idea around it. From one family coaster that opened in the mid 2020s to another, Dark Coaster dims its placement at number 9. I don't necessarily know what coaster enthusiasts say is the weakest non kids coaster in the park, but I wouldn't be surprised if the common answer was this one. And yes, it does more stuff worse than Big Bad Wolf, The Wolf's Revenge, but I think it rides really better than that one. In addition to a strong theming and storytelling, I'll take those tire driven launches with an extra lap on those over Big Bad Wolf, The Wolf's Revenge's mild maneuvers. Dark Coaster's name is also better than that attraction, but that's not saying a lot. Names can only affect an attraction so much. Besides, I'm not an anti fan of Kings Island's Orion like I used to be. In fact, that's my second favorite attraction in the park now. But on to the next coaster. Invader, the only wooden coaster in the park, is another attraction that doesn't receive attention amongst the coaster community. But I thought it rode good with a couple of airtime moments, which is the biggest reason I have this ahead of the coasters ranked below it. As decent as Dark Coaster and Big Bad Wolf The Wolf's Revenge are as a whole, the way Invader rides when I catch it on a good day have them beat. But not quite the rest. The gap between numbers 8 and 7 is very close. However, I'm sure I got to ride Invader at its very best. But as of today, there was an upgrade for the next coaster on this list that I haven't yet done. And when I get the chance to do so, then I'm sure the decision is final. But it turned out that even if that upgrade I'm talking about didn't happen, I still prefer this next coaster over Invader for a couple of reasons. At the time of this video's recording, Tempesto dives its way into number 7. I say at the time because just this season, Tempesto got its restraints converted from comfort colors into lap bars. Notice the difference? You can probably assume this coaster is one of my guilty pleasures in the community because I used to think this was the most underrated coaster in the park. But my rides last year felt not just slightly weaker, but more painful. But thanks to this restraint change for Tempesto, its ride experience should be better than it ever was without those things over your shoulders. Now, what makes Tempesto, even how it rode a couple of years ago, better than Invader? I think it has a better color scheme, name, layout, and theme/theming that fits my taste. And during my rides on it in 2021, I thought it exceeded my expectations, which, trust me when I say, that's not something every coaster can do in terms of a ride experience. When I return to Busch Gardens Williamsburg and ride Tempesto again, I'm sure it'll have what it takes to go higher in my coaster rankings, including a coaster at this park that I'll talk about right now. Far and away, the oldest existing coaster at Busch Gardens Williamsburg slithers into number 6 on this list, Loch Ness Monster. And man, does this place take such great care into this thing. To put it into perspective, this coaster opened in 1978 and was pretty ambitious when brought to the coaster industry. It tried to break the roller coaster record, albeit failed, while having a pair of interlocking vertical loops. And after a few rides of its model being scrapped over the years, it's still waiting for guests to ride to this day. How? 2021 was the year I rode this coaster for the first time, and I thought it was the weakest coaster in the park after that visit. That wasn't strictly for kids. But since then, the park planned and successfully reopened this coaster with a refurbishment that extended its service life. And when I fulfilled my chances to try it out post refurb, I thought it rode pretty better. Of course, I was aiming for the back car because I thought that was going to be the best car on the ride. But with that excellent setting, decent layout, and great idea behind the titular creature in Scottish mythology, those make the coaster even better already. I'm glad this coaster was decided to stay for more years to come. Unlike the other custom looping aerodynamics coaster in the state, you won't be missed by me. When the original Big Bad Wolf closed and left the park permanently, Busch Gardens Williamsburg knew they needed to build a successor to live up to the legacy of that attraction. And although I've never got to ride that attraction, I'm sure that after riding Verbolten when it was warmed up, I can say with certainty that it's a worthy replacement. A couple of coaster enthusiasts may say, "It's just a family coaster. How can a coaster like that be this excellent of an attraction?" However, I disagree with that claim. Verbolten is not a family coaster, and I gotta say, the top 5 roller coasters at Busch Gardens Williamsburg of any choosing are excellent on average, and better than your typical amusement parks. But you're probably wondering why I imply that it's too much to be a family coaster. That's because I have a friend of mine who claims that he's heard kids cry coming off of that attraction, and I see that for sure. Don't believe me? All right, I'll go through a couple of the elements to prove that claim. But there will be spoilers ahead. So if you don't want to be struck by the alert, skip to the time on screen right now. Verbolten's prime ride time starts with an LSM launch into an indoor section of the ride, which is dark, and may have slightly disturbing effects and ambiance for young children to go through. Elements in the indoor section include a maneuver to the right, a forceful helix, a dive off of a mid course brake run, and most startling of all, a vertical drop track, leading you to the second launch on the ride, which then leads you to the most iconic element on Verbolten, the big drop down the Rhine River that can be photographed by the bridge between the park's Italy and Oktoberfest section. Just like the big bad wolf back in the day. And trust me, I got airtime on this coaster, including that element. The restraints can be odd during your ride, but I don't remember there being any seatbelts on Verbolten. Nevertheless, that explanation should tell you how Verbolten is too much for kids to experience at such a young age. Something that family coasters aren't supposed to do, period. But I love Verbolten, and I don't see it getting any worse anytime soon, because Busch Gardens Williamsburg announced Verbolten, Forbidden Turn, in addition to update and modernize the attraction's theming and special effects. I can just see that getting better from here. Better than the next coaster on this list? We'll just see about that. One of my favorite coaster models from B&M is the Hyper Slash Giga model because of how high quality the products of that model are every time. And while Apollo's Chariot isn't one of my favorites of the model, there's still some strong reasons to like it. Heck, Apollo's Chariot was the first one of the entire model when it opened in 1999. So, as if there weren't any signs of them being capable of doing better when they were getting started, there you go. Like, I'll admit Apollo's Chariot doesn't ride the best of the whole model, and that's coming from someone who's ridden it all warmed up at night with zero signs of any trim slowing the ride down. Speaking of night, this coaster's setting is excellent. Even though this coaster may be pretty close to a parking lot, somehow, the trees, water, and sights make the night ride look beautiful. And I love the soundtrack on Apollo's Chariot too. While not my favorite, period, I found it to be so good, it sounds better than how the attraction rides itself. All in all, Apollo's Chariot is such a classic in the United Parks history of attractions, let alone at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. But while I won't deny it's one that I'd give it a thumbs up, it's not quite as excellent as the coasters I consider to be on the podium. Before I start beyond this point, I like to say that these three coasters at Busch Gardens Williamsburg are all amazing attractions. If I thought about grading them an A minus at worst, I'd do it. It's that no matter which way you put it, there's always bound to be rides better than others, but this is what I came up with for the top three. Am I crazy in the slightest for addressing a B&M dive coaster as amazing compared to the entire history of roller coasters as a whole? Probably, because this coaster model doesn't do a lot. However, I've been going to Busch Gardens Williamsburg since I was 3 years old, and one of the first memories I've ever had at an amusement parks was seeing Griffin right from the ground, tall, imposing, and blue. I remember that holding brake, splashdown, and that drop that goes straight to steep so quickly. That's why Griffin is the coaster at this park with the most sentimental values towards me. And then riding it for the first time about 12 years later brought back somewhat bittersweet memories. However, enough about my bias. I've ridden Griffin a few times since the first ride, including once where the restraint was as open as you can get. And when I got airtime, I was flying out of my seat. Of course, the coaster is safe, and I get airtime every time I ride it. But after riding more dive coasters from B&M since, I'm sure that Griffin has what it takes to beat all of those, in addition to the rest of the entire model once I ride them. That should tell you how big of a fan I am of Griffin. But as strong as my praise sounds, as well as how excellent a B&M dive coaster can be, it's not enough to be better than an amazing B&M invert, such as... Talk about a beast of a coaster model this is. Alpengeist is not just B&M's biggest coaster in their history, but the tallest full-circuit inverted coaster on the planet. But I don't say this just to showcase my marketing skills, but because this coaster rode like it was out of control, making your body feel every weight of force. A couple elements that stood out this way were the Cobra roll, especially, vertical loop, Immelman, and even that one element after the mid course, the 0G roll. I say even for that element because that mid course brake run can brutally slow the train down once it hits it. However, the speed of the mid course brake run decreasing the train's kinetic energy varies depending on the day of the year. And I'm confident that I've gotten at least one fast ride before where I felt the intensity of every element from start to finish in the best seat possible. That of which took place during Halloween last year when it was dark out. And like Apollo's Chariot, Alpenguy's setting makes it a must do for a night ride at this park. But other things I like about this inverted coaster are its layout, color scheme, logo, and theming. Those aspects can help make Alpengeist what was my favorite coaster in the park, but when I returned last year, one coaster there surpassed it. And to no one's surprise, it's harnessing the speed and strength of five Roman gods is no joke for sure, because Pantheon is an outstanding coaster. I agree that it's Busch Gardens Williamsburg's best attraction, and don't see that changing anytime soon. Why, you might ask? It rides like it's the best compared to all the other coasters in the park, in addition to a layout that's my favorite there, and a strong setting and theme. Although the last two could be executed better by adding more seclusion and immersion, I feel content enough with the effort Busch Gardens Williamsburg put into those. And other things I like about Pantheon are its trains, logo, name, and restraints. Some of the elements that stand out to be my favorites on Pantheon include the drop off the top hat, zero G winder, the outward banked airtime hill, and especially the bunny hops on the swing launch section when going backwards and forwards with enough momentum to complete that top hat. That last one may be my favorite element on any coaster at this park, not gonna lie. And that should be enough to tell you why Pantheon is my favorite coaster in the park.
There you have my ranking, folks. Were there any takes or reasons that stood out to you as a surprise? Better yet, have you ever been to Busch Gardens Williamsburg? If so, how many of the 11 coasters did you ride? And what were the highlights of those experiences? Feel free to share a thought in the comments. Speaking of comments, it's time for the comment shoutout program, where I take 3 random comments of my choosing and read them out. These comments come from my last major video on YouTube, going on a picnic and some rides at Stricker's Grove. Wait, hang on. It looks like no one commented on it as of today. Oh well. If you want to see your words in my next major video, feel free to leave a few of those here and it could be selected. But please note that spam, sensitive, inappropriate, or inflammatory comments will not be read. And before you speak up, yes, I indeed took the idea from Theme Park Crazy. So credit goes to him for that. If you like what you saw in this video, please be sure to give it a like. It would be a definite help with the YouTube algorithm. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to the channel so you never miss a video from yours truly. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, as well as Roblox and my brand new Facebook account. Link is in my bio for all of those. Thanks for watching, and remember, Sky Guy is my guy.